This thread from Kim.com, who I seem to remember from somewhere, was one of the most standout things I saw this morning when I woke up. And he's talking about just how bad of a situation the U.S. economy is in and what, you know, and sort of illustrates it pretty well here. So just want to read through this real quick. He says, "This might be the most important thread I ever make, big picture stuff about the major global collapse that is coming." And it really is, guys. I will try to help you understand why the future is not what we're hoping for. It's worse than most can imagine. Our leaders know, but what are they planning? The United States did not have a surplus or balanced budget since 2001. In the past 50 years, the U.S. has had only 4 years of profit. In fact, all the profit the U.S. has had would not have been enough to pay for 6 months of this current year's deficit, the current yearly deficit. So, how did the U.S. pay for things? And you see this chart here sort of just illustrates the this in blue or 4 years of profit, which is really amazing when you look at it in that context. U.S. spending and debt has spiraled out of control, and the government can only raise money it needs by printing it. That obviously causes inflation. I mean, everybody should know this too, and know that we printed trillions of dollars over the last 2 years. I mean, for the fourth grader explanation of inflation, they say because governments print too much money. It's like taxing you extra because you pay more for the things you need, and all your assets decline in value. See the U.S. money printing frenzy. Yeah, look at this, guys. Look at 2020. Look how quick we have printed so much money. That is absolutely incredible. And, well, look, I'll just go through this. The reason why the U.S. got away with it for so long is because U.S. dollar is the world's reserve currency. Nations everywhere hold USD as a secure asset. So when the U.S. government prints trillions, it's robbing Americans and the entire world. The biggest theft in history. So the thing is that it was the world reserve currency, largely in part because it's the petrodollar. So we have arrangements with all these other countries where they would only transact in U.S. dollars to buy and sell oil and gas. Our sanctions against Russia has completely upended that because a lot of countries depend on Russia for natural gas to heat their homes or for just power in general, especially in Europe. And now they have to buy it in rubles. And also China and India have been negotiating with some OPEC countries in the Middle East, talking about going on to a digital yuan. So, the policy makers who put these sanctions in place knew this would happen. And the people who printed this money knew this would happen. The problem is that, and then back here also, it's the biggest theft in world history because banks are getting this money first, for the most part, and people who are connected and have, are able to direct aid to their companies or to themselves from the federal government, they get this money first. And before you ever realize how devalued it is, they get to use that money to buy real assets like homes or infrastructure with the money, and it's still worth in your minds or the buy, whoever's selling to them, it's still worth the same. It's not until it gets out there and circulates that people realize how devalued it is. Okay, so the problem is that this has been going on for decades, and there's now no way to fix it. The reality is that the U.S. has been bankrupt for some time, and what's coming next is a nightmare. Mass poverty and new systems of control. Let me explain why this isn't just doom and gloom talk. Total U.S. debt is at $90 trillion. U.S. unfunded liabilities are at $169 trillion. Combined, that's $778,000 per U.S. citizen, or $2 million per U.S. taxpayer, because not everybody pays taxes. There's a lot of people on the dole. Remember, the only way the U.S. government can operate now is by printing more money, which means hyperinflation is inevitable. And that is really how we make money. We don't have a manufacturing base. We don't have a trade surplus because we don't make anything. We're operating on a scam at this point. The total value of all companies listed on the U.S. stock market is $53 trillion. The real value is much lower because the U.S. has been printing trillions of dollars to provide interest-free loans to investment banks to pump up the stock market. It's a scam. It sure is. Most of the $53 trillion is air. The value of all U.S. assets combined, every piece of land, real estate, all savings, all companies, everything that all citizens, businesses, entities, and the state own is worth $193 trillion. That number is full of air, just like the U.S. stock market. So let's do the math. U.S. total debt is 90 trillion. U.S. unfunded liabilities 169 trillion. U.S. total assets 259, or sorry, total debt and unfunded liabilities is 259 trillion. Minus all U.S. assets at 193 trillion is a deficit of 66 trillion. So it's a loss. We're not making money. They do love their six sixes, don't they? So that 66 trillion of debt and liabilities after every asset in the U.S. has been sold off. Do you understand? So even if the U.S. could sell all assets at the current value, which is impossible, it would still be broke. The U.S. is beyond bankrupt. The patient is already dead. The patient is now a zombie. You probably wonder, why are things still going? Why didn't everything collapse yet? It's all perception, denial, and dependency. The perception is that the U.S. is the largest economy and strongest military in the world. But in reality, the U.S. is broke and can't support its army. I guess that's an upside. The denial is that all nations depend on a strong U.S. dollar or global markets collapse. The reason why the U.S. zombie keeps going is because the end of the U.S. is the end of Western prosperity and an admission that the current system failed as a model for the world. It doesn't change the reality. The collapse is inevitable and coming. So what are our leaders planning? You may have heard about the Great Reset or the New World Order. It's a controlled demolition of the global markets, economies, and the world as we know it. A shift into a new dystopian future where the elites are masters of the slaves without the cosmetics of democracy. Without a controlled demolition, the world will collapse for all, including the elites. The world has changed so much, and nothing seems to make any sense anymore. The blatant corruption is out in the open. The obvious propaganda media, the erosion of our rights. What's the end game? Yeah, that's the end game. You just said it. It's going to be a new currency, the central bank digital currency, which will be controlled even more tightly by a smaller group of elites. And it will exercise even greater control over you because they will be able to tie you to a wallet, which you use to use this digital currency, and they'll be able to stop you from spending it on certain things or at all, depending on who you are and how much they like you. Think a social credit score. And that will be tied to your biometrics. So you can't escape it. You can't pretend to be somebody else. It's all about control. It's all about enslaving the world and establishing a new form of feudalism on you. So just look at that. That is the U.S.'s profitability since 1970.